Hello, Traeger. Thanks for joining me for a story from my vacation. See if you can figure out where I'm reading from. At the end of the story, you can have a chance to win the book.
Go. Hi, Traeger. It's Mrs. G. I hope you're having a great summer. I am coming to you live from one of the stops on my vacation, and I have a special book to share with you today. My book is called Coney the Pika's Warming World. This is an interesting book because it has both a fictional story and it has some non-fiction facts along the way. Today I'm just going to share the fictional story with you. Coney the Pika had been awake since sunrise, snug in his den. His den was in a jumbled pile of rocks high on a mountain, so high up that the trees could not grow there. Winters were too cold and summers were too short. Coney liked the cold, and he liked his mountain home. The mountaintop was too harsh for the trees, but other plants did grow nearby. At the foot of the rock pile was an alpine meadow, lush with grasses and wildflowers. Can you see all the pika? See Coney in there? Leaving his cozy den, Coney scampered over the rocks to the meadow for breakfast. He munched on some moist green plants. But he also had to gather food for the winter. The cold season was coming soon, with its shorter days, snow, and cold. So Coney cut and gathered grasses and flower stems and then carried them back to the rocks. Coney placed his gathered plants on a rock beneath a larger boulder to dry. The plants made a small haystack. Then Coney rubbed his cheeks on the boulder. His scent would let other pikas know that this haystack was his. Many other pikas lived on Coney's rock pile. Dozens of dens scattered among the boulders made up a colony of pikas. Other animals lived on the mountain and the rock pile. Marmots liked to sunbathe, and golden-mantled ground squirrels munched on the same meadow plants that Coney ate. Chipmunks sometimes visited from the forest below, and bighorn sheep would rest in the mountain. Mountain goats came to nibble the lichen from the rocks. Coney would bark at them if they got too close to his den. Coney climbed higher up the rock pile, stopping often to look and listen. He knew the hawks, weasels, and foxes hunted pikas. His fur coat was almost the color of the rocks. When he remained still, the hunters might not see him. From his perch, Coney saw another pika moving toward his haystack. He squeaked a high-pitched yeek, yeek to warn the other pika away. If his warning didn't work, he would run and chase the bandit. Other pikas stopped and looked. Was a hunter near? The day grew warmer and Coney felt sick. He needed to cool off. He found a shady spot beneath a big rock, but the hot air seemed to find him anyway. Coney went to the very top of the rock pile, hoping it would be cooler, but it was just as hot. There was no place else to go. What if he couldn't cool down? Then what? Other pikas had moved their dens up the mountain, looking for cooler spots. But it was hot there too. There was no place higher to go, and it was harder to gather enough food for their haystacks. As they scurried from the mountaintop down to the meadow and back, the pikas spent more time in the open. A hawk or a weasel might see them and catch them by surprise. Just then, Coney heard a sharp warning, yeek, from a neighbor. The dark shadow of a hawk flashed across the rocks. A loud scream filled the air. As Coney dove into a crack between the two boulders, a gust of wind from the bird's wings brushed his coat. That was too close. When the hawk was gone, Coney returned to his den for a nap. Sleepily, Coney thought about last winter. Less snow had fallen than usual. Without a deep blanket of snow covering the rock pile, Coney's den had been colder than it used to be. Had he eaten more of his stored food to stay warm? What if he ran out of food in the winter? Then what? Other animals like marmots would soon hibernate, sleeping through the winter in their dens. But Coney and the other pikas did not hibernate. Instead, the pikas would stay busy, digging tunnels in the blanket of snow that protected them from the coldest winter weather, if the snow was deep enough. But Coney's mountainside home was changing. It was becoming too warm for the pikas. Coney missed the deep snows of winter, and now summers were too hot. But there was no place else to go. What if winters kept getting less snowy and summers kept getting hotter? Then what? A loud yeek from a nearby pika woke Coney from his short nap. He peeked from the opening of his den to see what the danger was. A rumble came from the sky, but there was no hawk. There was no hawk above, and no weasel lurking among the rocks. Just brown, dry grasses in the meadow, and a shimmer of heat rising from the ground. That evening, just before sunset, Coney hurried to the top of the highest boulder in the rock pile. The boulder was still warm from the day's sun. It was late for a pika to be out of his den. A few stars began to twinkle. The sky was clear and growing dark. Coney looked around and listened. His breath steamed in the cool air. There were no other pikas in sight, and no foxes, weasels, or hawks. Nothing to warn the others about. But Coney called out, "Yeek, yeek, yeek!" His warning echoed across the mountain. Yeek, yeek, yeek! What do you think Coney's warning was about? Who was he trying to warn? Was anyone listening? Traeger, I'd love to hear what you think Coney's message was about and what you can do to help save Coney and the other pikas. Thanks for listening. I look forward to seeing you soon.
I hope you enjoyed the story. If you think you know where I'm reading from, email Mrs. G your guess. All correct guesses will be entered in a drawing for a copy of the book.